Coming up, the Bucks get pushed to the limit by the Celtics bench, and the Suns put on a show for Kevin Durant. This is Locked On Game to Game, NBA.
Every game, every team, every angle. Locked On Game to Game, your team every day.
Welcome in. You are listening to Locked On Game to Game NBA, local experts joining us to go over the biggest stories on the hardwood. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you so much for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. The Milwaukee Bucks got the overtime win over Boston last night for their 11th win in a row, but they were truly tested by a Celtics team that was playing without Jaylen Brown, without Jason Tatum, and without Marcus Smart, just to name a couple of them. Locked On Bucks joins us to go over a win, but probably would have been happier if it was less of a nail-biter.
It took an extra 5 minutes, but the Bucks do pick up the win against the Boston Celtics and extend their winning streak to 11. My name's Kane Pittman. I'm the host of the Locked On Bucks podcast. This was a severely depleted Boston Celtics team. No Tatum, no Brown, no Smart, no Horford. The injury list just continued to extend. And for that reason, this was a game that the Bucks absolutely had to have. But it took until the fourth quarter for the Bucks to almost awaken from their slumber. Turnovers were a problem, certainly through the first three quarters, and kept Boston with an edge. But the Bucks closed it out and their stars got it done. Giannis was huge with 36 points, 13 rebounds, 9 assists. But this was a Jrue Holiday classic. 40 points, 5 rebounds, 7 assists, 3 steals, 8 for 12 from 3. And he hit some big shots and came up with some big defensive plays when the Bucks needed it. And this was a very important win because the Bucks now tie the season series at 1 apiece with 1 game to play. That could really mean something for these two teams at the back end of the season and potential home court in the postseason.
KD isn't back on the court just yet, but he was in Phoenix and he got a look at his new squad, easily taking care of the Sacramento Kings. Locked On Suns goes over all of the good stuff post-game.
With Kevin Durant courtside, the Phoenix Suns play like they barely need him at all. Brendan Clean coming to you after a Suns win over the Sacramento Kings here at home. The first game in Phoenix since Kevin Durant was traded to the Suns at the deadline last week. He's sitting on the Suns bench. The crowd is going crazy, and the Suns make, frankly, short work of the Sacramento Kings. Devin Booker with a massive game. No three-pointers attempted. Just a vintage Booker performance. Chris Paul getting close to 20 assists, and DeAndre Ayton just beasting inside. Domantas Sabonis, the Kings small ball looks. Just really no match for what the Suns brought. So no Mikal Bridges, no Cam Johnson, obviously no Jay Crowder. They do get a debut from TJ Warren, but KD not even here, and the Suns still make short work of the 3 seed in the Western Conference. For more on these Suns, listen to Locked On Suns wherever you get podcasts.
The Raptors' newest big addition coming through in a big way against Orlando. Locked On Toronto loving the flashback from Jakob Poeltl. Locked On Magic looks back on the first half of the season for Orlando.
So that's why the Raptors made that trade. Sean Woodley here from Locked On Raptors to break down the Toronto Raptors 123-113 win over the Orlando Magic on Tuesday night in Toronto. The big takeaway from this one, Jakob freaking Poeltl doing exactly what he was brought in to do last week under controversial circumstances. Of course, the Raptors were pegged by many to be sellers going into last week's trade deadline. Instead, their only move was to add the former Toronto Raptor and Jakob Poeltl, who they, of course, traded to San Antonio in the Kawhi Leonard trade many moons ago. Yak is back now, though, and he was incredible, showing exactly why the Raptors made the move against the Magic on Tuesday night. 30 points to go along with 9 rebounds, 2 assists, a steal, and 6 blocks on 15 of 17 shooting is the type of center play the Raptors haven't seen in ages, going all the way back to the days of Marc Gasol, Serge Ibaka, and before them, Jonas Valanciunas. Jakob Poeltl, just a great addition, addresses a lot of the Raptors' issues, and helps to make other players on the Raptors better. Fred VanVleet, for example, tonight, 15 assists, most of which came operating as a pick-and-roll maestro in concert with Jakob Poeltl, the type of pick-and-roll partner he hasn't had in years in Toronto either. It might be too late for the Raptors to truly salvage this season. They're 28-31 going into the All-Star break here. They probably are too far out of it to make a true earnest run at the number 6 seed, but with Jakob Poeltl in tow, they just might have a chance. I'll have more broken down on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Raptors. Be sure to tune in.
The Orlando Magic head to the All-Star break with a disappointing loss, but that disappointment is empowering. This is Philip Rossman-Reich, the host of Locked On Magic. And the conversation about the Orlando Magic has completely changed this year. They've gone from a team that was nice and young, trying to figure out how to win, to a team that firmly believes it can make the play-in tournament, firmly believes it can climb over 3 other teams and get to that 10th spot. Now, that's not a huge thing, but for such a young team, for a team that won 22 games last year, that is a big thing. And the Orlando Magic are still figuring out how to do it. They certainly didn't have it on the second night of a back-to-back, where they continued to struggle as they fall to the Toronto Raptors 123-113. There are plenty of guys that are putting up great efforts and doing everything they need to do, but the consistency is still not there. That's the thing that the Magic have to continue to learn through the last quarter of the season. And now that they're at the All-Star break, hopefully they can get a chance to recover and get themselves back into shape for a big postseason run.
Coming up, the Wizards get a win on the road in Portland. This is Locked On Game to Game NBA. Today's edition of Locked On Game to Game is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. New customers get a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. So what you need to do is download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It is safe, secure, and super easy for you to use. You can bet on a lot of different stuff, from the money line to point scores to how many three-pointers are scored in the game. FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel. Welcome back to Locked On Game to Game NBA. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you so much for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. The Wizards somehow got the job done on the road in Portland, thanks mostly to Kyle Kuzma and Kristaps Porzingis. Locked On Trailblazers and Locked On Wizards go over everything from both sides.
What's up, everybody? It's your boy Brandon Scott again from Locked On Wizards. The Washington Wizards get a big and much-needed win tonight in Portland, beating the Trailblazers 126-101. But how did the Wizards get this win? Simple. Kyle Kuzma coming back from the injured list and solidifying this solid 3 of Kyle Kuzma, Bradley Beal, and Kristaps Porzingis. They showed out tonight. They combined for a combined 80 points tonight. Bradley Beal, as the franchise player, definitely led the way with his vision and his passing tonight, and a couple of big dunks, including a really big dunk in the fourth quarter. But through his clutch play in the fourth quarter, he kept the Wizards in the game. So this is a big victory for the Washington Wizards. Now, they have one game left on this West Coast road trip, which is Thursday night at 8 o'clock against the Minnesota Timberwolves, which would wrap up this road trip and hit into the All-Star break. So everybody have a good night and peace.
That will do it for this edition of Locked On Game to Game NBA. Thank you once again for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. And now make sure that you are signed up to follow Locked On NBA. And of course, your favorite team's Locked On podcast on YouTube and wherever else you get your podcasts from. I'm Kainani Stevens. This has been Locked On Game to Game.